Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the conclusion of World's Funnest. Yes, we are. We are wrapping up the World's Funnest event. This is fun, right? I mean, well, I guess it should be, right? World's Funnest. It should be fun. You would hope it would be fun. This is the end of the whole thing. So, in the last video that we did, we basically had this kind of cat and mouse game, right? Where Batmite was trying to get away from Mxyzptlk. Mxyzptlk was chasing after him, and they kept hopping and skipping through these different universes. Now, so far, we've only really seen the fifth dimension, the real world, and the world of anthropomorphic animals, right? Captain Carrot. I love Captain Carrot. Captain Carrot's a super bunny. I love Captain Carrot so much. I don't know why, he's just like my favorite character in all of DC Comics. I love the fact that he's just a super bunny. This time around, Batmite of course teleports away just like he always had been, but when Mxyzptlk finally locates him, it's on the planet of Apokolips. And Mxyzptlk has no idea what this is, right? And it's kind of interesting to see that Mxyzptlk doesn't know who Darkseid is. He's never heard of the planet of Apokolips or anything like that. Now keep in mind, this is a kind of an Elseworld story. The main DC universe, Mxyzptlk probably knows who Darkseid is, right? I mean, he's aware of Darkseid's existence. Off the top of my head, I don't really know of any stories where the two crossed over, but I mean, we kind of have to believe that he does, right? That he has to be aware of this guy. And so of course, Darkseid's making this kind of grandiose speech to all of his followers. Now, for those of you guys reading this, Darkseid does seem a little bit out of character. And the reason why is because this story is kind of designed to sort of mimic 1960s, 1970s, maybe even a little bit of 1950s comics, right? And so this is how the characters were written back then, right? They were written in not really a cartoony and a silly way, but really more kind of like on the nose, right? It was kind of like, I am Darkseid, and today I'm going to go achieve this thing, and I'm going to do this with the help of my followers because I'm Darkseid and nothing can stop me. That's kind of how they talked. Nowadays it's totally different. Like, I'm Darkseid and it's about to pop off. Like, it's about to get real, right? Like that's kind of how they talk now. You know, it's far less on the nose than it used to be, which in reality, it kind of makes me a little nostalgic for those 60s, 70s comics. Granted, it makes me nostalgic for an era of comics that I didn't live in, right? I was born in 84. I wasn't even alive back then, let alone able to understand what it was that I was reading. I'm a 90s comics kid, right? Like I was reading comics in the 90s. So all this stuff is, you know, 20, 30 years before my time. But it is kind of a cool thing because when Mxyzptlk and Batmite show up, of course, Darkseid doesn't really know what to make of them, but considers them to be kind of foolish, right? It's foolish and nonsensical. And as we know, Darkseid does not suffer fools. And so he basically tries to use his Omega effect on Mxyzptlk, and it doesn't work, right? It's just kind of like, well, that's interesting. And then Mxyzptlk in turn annihilates the entirety of planet Apokolips, and presumably even the High Father, right? Like the planet of New Genesis. But because of the fact that Darkseid can't truly be killed, at least seemingly not by Mxyzptlk, which is kind of an interesting little thing here, you'd think that Darkseid could be killed. Imaginary Axis, I think, actually has a really, really good theory where he was talking about how there's true form Darkseid, which is basically the very embodiment of evil itself. And because evil can never truly be killed, that true form of Darkseid can, not only can it never be killed, it can never actually be defeated, right? It's something along those lines. I don't remember what it is, but Darkseid ends up, or at least Mxyzptlk ends up basically dropping the anti-life equation, which is basically himself plus Batmite equals anti-life, and Darkseid just kind of laughs and then goes insane. And that's how this kind of follows, right? From there, we pick up with this more cartoony looking universe where things look a little bit silly. And again, Mxyzptlk is chasing after Batmite, and they come across the Justice League. And the initial thought is, I thought we wiped these guys out. Like, we wiped out all the universes that have the Justice League, and it turns out that's not true. Instead, this is the universe of the Super Friends. The Super Friends was a I don't know how many of you guys ever watched the Super Friends TV show. If you ever get a chance, just go back and watch an episode. It's definitely dated. It is definitely not aged well, and it's definitely a reflection of the time. Like, for example, when the characters talked, nothing moved but their mouths. And it was kind of goofy, to be honest, right? Like, we're the Super Friends. We're super friendly to our friends. And that's basically what the show was like, right? Like, that's more or less what it was. You know, it was like, we're happy and we do happy things, you know, unless you're a bad guy, and then we treat you like a dick. That's more or less what it was. But Mxyzptlk kind of makes this joke, right? Like you guys ever find it weird that nothing moves but your mouths when you talk? And they're kind of like, I mean, we don't know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, well then whatever. So they wipe out the entirety of the Super Friends, right? Mxyzptlk kills all the Super Friends, then he kills the Wonder Twins, right? Now here's the question to ask here. Is this really a loss? Is it really a problem that the Super Friends and the Wonder Twins have been destroyed? I mean, I see this as an absolute win, if I'm being honest with you guys. I know it's a terrible thing to say, but I see this as an absolute win. But again, they kind of hop and skip around these various universes until they end up in this place that's pretty grisly. And this is the reason why World's Funnest was so cool, is because of course Jack Kirby wasn't really alive at the time the story was written, so there was no real way for Jack Kirby to actually draw the story. But Frank Miller was, or Frank Miller still is alive. And so what this does is it basically picks up in the Dark Knight Returns universe. And like literally they show up here with Batman and Superman from Dark Knight Returns. And these guys are a lot more grisly than you would normally expect. But Mxyzptlk kind of, runs us off at the same time. Now, one of the things to get here is that in the Dark Knight Returns, there was a lot of narrative that went on in that story, right? A lot of narration. Of course, there were words, there was text, people talking, but a good chunk of it was narration. And that's kind of what you get here. You also get Carrie Kelly, which is kind of cool. But you basically get this comic written as if it was written in the Dark Knight Returns universe. And that's what we're going to find. As we're jumping through these different universes, we're basically going to find that these different universes are written exactly the way they were in the comics. And Superman's just kind of like, okay, so like this is a little wild. So he goes to face off against Mxyzptlk, gets obliterated like that, right? Batman jumps in, and Batman basically gets a pie in the face for one. And he kind of deserved it because Dark Knight Returns Batman was kind of a dick. And then of course he gets hit with like a fake boxing glove or an extended boxing glove, gets sent flying through a window, and then Mxyzptlk wipes out their entire universe as well, right? And it just kind of follows that fashion. Now this next universe they go to, I'm not really familiar with this one. I'm not really sure what this one is. I don't know if, I want to say it's like the DC animated universe. I feel like that's the case. I'm not 100% sure. Let me know down in the comment section if any of you guys know, because it's kind of hard to like search up a universe based on a picture. I guess I probably should have tweeted it out like, hey guys, what universe is this from? But it's kind of wild here, right? Because Batmite sort of showing up here is kind of like, okay, all these villains kind of seem to be the ones running the show, and ultimately he ends up locating Batman. Like the conversation is a little strange because Batman doesn't know who Batmite is, and then of course you end up having Aquaman who comes after Batmite, and then of course with Batmite making his move against Aquaman, this draws Mr. Mxyzptlk, and of course Mxyzptlk does the same thing that he's been doing, which is just wiping out different universes, right? Now at this point we jump forward again, and we basically end up picking up in the post-crisis universe. Now this is where things get a little weird, right? Get a little wonky, because of the events of Hypertime in DC Comics, post-crisis was kind of considered its own universe, right? Like the time period, the Crisis on Infinite Earths time period is kind of considered like its own universe, or at least it was until Rebirth happened. And so basically you have like all these people here who have like, Superman's kind of leading the charge, like we just survived, the near collapse of like everything in existence, but we're now in a new universe, right? We're in this new reality, and we can go forward from here, and we can start over, and we can make this place great, right? That's why you kind of see a lot of these characters here. You see Wally West, and this is kind of interesting. It looks like adult Wally West. I'm not 100% sure, because Wally West ended up getting aged up at the end of post-Crisis, or at the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, to the point that he became an adult as opposed to a kid, which is how you kind of went forward with Wally West as the new Flash. So it looks like it's right. It looks like it's continuity-wise correct. But you've also got Power Girl. Kind of a funny thing about the post-Crisis landscape. A lot of people look at Crisis on Infinite Earths and see it as like the great reset of DC Comics. No, there were all kinds of problems, right? Like Batman didn't get a new origin until like 2 or 3 years after it came out. Power Girl didn't get a new origin, I don't think, until the events of like Infinite Crisis. Hawkman had all kinds of continuity errors, right? Like there were all kinds of issues that plagued Crisis on Infinite Earths after it came out. That's why we got all those crises, right? Crisis in Time, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis was to fix all these things that came after Crisis on Infinite Earths. So it was kind of weird. But of course, you end up having Mxyzptlk who shows up here, faces off against these guys. Superman's just kind of like, I have no idea what's going on here, right? But like, we're going to destroy you, and then Mxyzptlk's like, no, you're not. And he basically manifests a giant kryptonite tombstone and throws it on Superman. And Superman's like, great Scott, kryptonite, a kryptonite tombstone with my name on it. And that's how Superman dies. The rest of what passes for the Justice League, more or less, of the Crisis on Infinite Earths team, they all jump in and they all get eradicated too, right? They all get totally destroyed. And that leads to like their whole universe being wiped out. And again, they just kind of hop, skip, and jump through these different realities until we pick up with what's probably my absolute favorite universe. We pick up with Kingdom Come. And it's kind of crazy to see Alex Ross basically drawing a portion of, World's Funnest. I will say, I think the way that Alex Ross drew Mxyzptlk was amazing, right? I absolutely loved it. And I love the way that he drew Batmite, right? I love the way that these two characters are designed because they look exactly the way we would expect them to, right? In the real world. And it makes sense, right? Alex Ross's, his art style is photorealistic. For those of you guys who are ever curious about that, he makes photorealistic art. And so it kind of makes sense that it would look that way. But literally all these, Kingdom Come superheroes kind of come come jumping in, and all of them are destroyed by, you know, Mxyzptlk, right? He's just kind of like, enough is enough, right? They all get wiped out, the whole universe gets totally obliterated, and it's back to Mxyzptlk and it's back to Batmite. And so what you end up having are these two guys, of course, you know, facing off against each other, and there really isn't anything else to, like, everything's been wiped out, right? All of existence has been totally destroyed. The only thing in possession that Batmite has from what used to effectively be the Omniverse, more or less, is just the helmet of Jay Garrick, right? That's all he has. Everything across the Omniverse has been totally destroyed. There's no fifth dimension, there's no alternate realities, there's no parallel dimensions, no, you know, wonky future dystopian timelines. There's nothing, right? There's absolutely nothing. Presumably, like, the source and the source wall and the presence and, like, all of them have all been destroyed, right? And that's why this story is usually referenced as being Mxyzptlk at his most powerful, because by the time you get to this point, everything that could conceivably exist in all of existence has been destroyed, right? So, like, assuming this is the entirety of the Omniverse, that means everything in Marvel Comics, right? So, like, the one above all, and right now the one below all, although he didn't exist at the time this story was written, you know, every character, every single superhero that exists out there has all been totally destroyed by Mxyzptlk, and you know, presumably because of Batmite as well. And so literally these are the two most powerful beings in all of creation. The only individuals that could stop these guys would be somebody more powerful from the fifth dimension, but that doesn't seem possible because the entire fifth dimension was destroyed. And so if somebody like that exists out there, they would have stopped Mxyzptlk, or they would have survived the destruction of their entire dimension, right? So as it stands right now, at least according to DC Comics at the time this story was written, Mxyzptlk and Batmite are the two single most powerful beings in the entirety of DC Comics. There is no one out there more powerful than them. Now, of course, you end up having Mxyzptlk basically throwing a kind of bomb at Batmite, who uses the helmet of Jay Garrick to basically block it, to kind of send it back to Mxyzptlk. And then, like, the two of them, like, Mxyzptlk just kind of starts laughing, and Batmite ends up laughing along with them. And what we end up finding out is this is just a game they're playing, right? It's just part of their thing. Like, it's what they do, right? It's just their version of having fun, playing this cat and mouse game where they chase after each other, they destroy the entirety of the Omniverse of all things in existence. It's just their way of having a good time. And of course, they reset everything back to normal, right? That's the power that they have. That's why I say Mxyzptlk is so ridiculously OP, right? It's just having fun, goofing off, and just resetting everything back to normal once they're done. There's nothing these guys cannot do, right? They are omnipotent in the most extreme degree. Like, they are the very definition of that word, right? Omnipotent, omniscient, the whole 9 yards. Nothing can get past them. And so they kind of make this deal. They're like, okay, so, like, same time next week, and it's like, yeah, let's do this again next week. And of course, that's where the story ends. But, like, it's cool, right? It's fun to have these guys who are just enjoying a rousing game of, like, destroying the multiverse, right? You know, just kind of chasing after each other. Now, we don't know if it happens the same way every week, or if it's just something different, right? You know, of course, their goal is to kind of be in competition, to give a hard time to Batman and Superman. And this kind of just seems like an instance where it just sort of got a little out of control, but it was nothing they couldn't fix, right? So it wasn't that big of a deal. It's kind of crazy, and it's kind of cool, and I really dig it. In all honesty, I would read a line of comics that follow the goofy exploits of Mxyzptlk and Batmite, right? I would read that comic pretty consistently, because I think it would be amazing. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Now we'll catch you all later. Peace.